Hi, thank you. What I'm presenting today is an introduction to... what I'm presenting today is an introduction to some of my background research relating to a series of artworks and projects from the past 2 years. Within my work, I'm interested in exploring, mapping, and unearthing entry and exit points within networks, specifically the effects of network technology. What I present today will relate to that practice, thinking about how we relate to virtual space, unpick the architecture of the web, and see through the haze of the cloud. I feel dissecting the processes we use today is pertinent, as with Web 2.0, the social web, our notion of mechanisms and architectures of the network have been skewed or forgotten. Most of this is through the changes in which devices we use and the promotion of the cloud, as Paul mentioned, a term popularized by Amazon's Elastic Compute Cloud, now the world's largest hosting system, and also the main image for many when trying to visualize the web. I feel this has led to a separation between us and our data, and skewed notions of public space, as illustrated by this message perhaps familiar to everyone here with a Facebook account. In short, data, where data exists, is tied to property, and property on which data exists often dictates the ownership of said data, all obscured by the immaterial notion of the cloud, which makes light of our data and its value as a means for us to part with. I want to make reference to Obama's recent safeguarding of the internet. Despite being a victory for net neutrality, it also has blurred or confused this issue, especially when we consider the widely reported statement by him at the time, the internet is a utility. We simply can't think of the internet as water or electricity. We need to think about it in more complex terms. So I will quickly present a couple examples of my own work and the strategies I've used that have led to my interest in the uses and representations of physical space in relation to the network, followed by some research references. This piece, the online work, Reliable Communications, uses chat logs from IRC communications over Soviet computer network Relcom during the 1991 Soviet coup attempt. It makes reference to the network not being censored as most mainstream media was at the time in the country by the KGB, and due to the structure with a connection with the wider world through a computer in Finland, information about the coup could be reported and smuggled out by members of Demos cooperative at the Institute of Atomic Energy near Red Square. Information was transcribed and smuggled in by academics in the US inversely. Ultimately, this action in support of the constitutional government preventing the Soviet hardliners' coup attempt. An interesting pre-Arab Spring example of network technology having massive political ramifications, with all the communications and conversations archived in real time by Relcom servers. All this happened in the open. Everyone could read the communications. Within this work, this is a screenshot of the work, which you can visit at reliablecommunications.net. I present chat logs, which are represented in real time based on the user's location, and linking with that the metadata timestamps of the conversations. The work roughly spans 2 decades of information. It is bookended by chat logs between Chelsea Manning and Adrian Lamo that led to Manning's conviction. A sub-work within this website, because many of my works are multi-layered, makes specific reference to a URL Manning posts to justify his reason for leaking the information. Manning posts this URL, sums it up for me, referring to the famous pale blue dot image taken by Voyager at the crest of Carl Sagan as the spacecraft left our solar system. Earth appears as a dot smaller than a pixel. On my rereading of the chat logs, this link was dead, and have been for some years. Only the file name hints at the original reference Manning was making. I decided to resurrect the image using the architecture of the web to relink the historical record with the work. A new image simply altered through inversion. The visitor to the work, upon scrolling the length of the page, is left with an iframe presentation of the current website hosting company Banos, a reference to both the physical host of the work and location, but also the link between Manning and the organization Banos, which hosted WikiLeaks at the time. As well as using display strategies relating to local time of the visitor, and the server hosting the work also makes heavy use of iframed websites to emphasize the shifting nature of the web. The strategies and content within the work went on to directly inform a wider series of works. My hosting arrangement with Bahnhof eventually led me to visit Pioneer, which is the data center that you can just about see, but I'll show you later on. And I went there to make a video piece, which is part of this series. I followed this up with work contained in a recent solo show at Solo Projects, which you can see here, and some work in the current group show at private settings at the Museum of Modern Art Warsaw. Both in part negotiate this. The piece Familiarity Breeds Contentment was hosted concurrently at both, in different configurations. Constructed from a former Google search appliance servers, hacked to host spam scraper sites, websites continuously searching and mining keywords relating to the exhibition, and posting results after the data is altered by the process known as spinning, a simple form of AI. This simple gesture, the service hosted within the gallery space, forefront the physical part of the internet. Visitors to the exhibition can navigate the website on their mobile device via public IP address of the location while viewing the physical container for the data, a noisy, power-consuming box. The work is both sculpture and digital work. The thinking behind this piece is the use of rogue operations, and its use of rogue operations relates to an interest in what can be thought of as politically motivated alternative data centers or data havens, and their different treatment of both data and the physical spaces hosted, in contrast to the anonymous data centers making up Amazon or Google networks, sort of the cloud network. Free Traveler, the solo show at Solo Projects, also made architectural and aesthetic references to data centers, Alibaba's supplier warehouses, Bitcoin mining operations in China, and alludes to the server rack structure as a template to present both the physical data and the technology in the show. Free Traveler makes reference to the notion of online communities as islands, as predicted by Bruce Sterling in his 1988 novel, Islands in the Net. And through subjective links back and forward, it also negotiates the books, The Invention of Morale, and the text Visit Port Watson, which I would encourage everyone to look up. This is the IP address of the server that I currently have hosted at the Museum of Modern Art in Warsaw, so you can navigate to it if you want to see the spam scraper site that the museum is hosting. In parallel to these works, I was also making work with the Amazon Mechanical Turk network, commissioning workers on the network to provide views of windows nearest their workspace. I mention this work briefly as the Mechanical Turk network illustrates an invisible labor force running the mechanisms of the internet, in short filling the gap between the limits of computing at present and the demand for streamlined performance of apps and websites. The resulting work, Outsourced Views, Visual Economies, attempts to visualize the end points of this network, presenting its physical edges. The MTurk network relates very closely to Amazon's cloud operations. It deliberately masks or hides the reality of the network, be it human or computer. Much has been made of the labor wages of Mechanical Turk workers. You can fight for your rights, but if you're rendered invisible by the system, what do you do? The picture Bruce Sterling paints in this quote of data havens in 1988 actually seems to have emerged quite differently. Although a quite accurate prediction, we now are constantly put in the position of being separated from our valuable data quite willingly and legally, signing away our rights through terms of service agreements, and as it transpired, often with the involvement of certain governments. Data havens have emerged in part as sites of shelter for websites operating inside the status quo, such as WikiLeaks or the Pirate Bay, as well as for other activities, legal or otherwise, and often under the banner of protecting the free web. What you see here is an image from the Pirate Bay. It appeared on their front page in 2008 as one of their doodles in a similar mode as Google Doodles, and perhaps a critique of the Google Doodle. It was produced by a user of the Pirate Bay, perhaps someone close to their operations, but was posted anonymously, and it was made to celebrate 10 million peers, 1 million torrents, 2.5 million registered users, 100 blog entries, Jubilee. I first came across and saved the image several years ago. It's since become a regular inspiration that appears in its form in my work, Reliable Communications, and was also the main inspiration for the show I mentioned before, Free Traveler. Being placed within a sea of Google Blue on my repurposed servers for familiarity breeds contentment, and in many ways the image also led to create the work Collocation Time Displacement, which I produced at one of the spaces mentioned later, Banos. What I find so fascinating about it is the rendering of the Pirate Bay's history to that point in time as a landscape. For me, the image goes beyond the standard riffing on the word piracy. The image offers a visualization of the internet, the terrain of that space being made up of the data it contains. And for this community, this is a visualization of those important data sets. The community and data exist as an island in the net. The Pirate Bay have been consistent in their self-described ongoing performance of decentralization, decentralizing their servers in order to remain online and outside the control of governments. In this image, the island hosting the bay only exists as a mythical In this image, the previous image, the island hosting the bay only exists as a mythical manifestation of their ideals, but tellingly featured in this image is Sealand, a real-life proclaimed principality or micronation off the coast of southern England. The Pirate Bay have sort of constantly sort of trolled or riffed on these sort of ideas of maneuvering themselves out of legalities of government. So along with the sort of Sealand stories, they also planted stories in the press of using drones to like distribute the Pirate Bay network. Sealand's history as a site for protest and opposition to the neighbouring local government, depending on your views about their sovereignty claim, is pre-digital, dating back to 1967, when the former World War II sea fort it inhabits was squatted for the use by pirate radio. The claim at the time was the fort was outside UK territorial waters, and the family inhabiting the fort, the Bates family, declared themselves the ruling monarchy. By broadcasting from outside the UK, their commercial radio station didn't need permission from the government and could challenge the state's monopoly on broadcasts at that time, while also making a profit from advertising, a tactic we've become familiar with online. The long-standing performative action has seemingly been both a challenge to concepts of borders and a critique of monarchy. Since 1987, when the UK's territorial borders were extended, Sealand has been firmly within the UK, and as such has never been recognised by any government. For now, the squatting is tolerated. Sealand is important as an early example of developments in communication technology to the questioning and challenging of the state, its borders and laws. Fast forward to 2007, it was surely this history that led to the Pirate Bay's attempt to buy Sealand, or at least the inspiration for the performative press release claiming this. The Pirate Bay is no stranger to seeding ridiculous claims in the mainstream media. In turn, this attempt led Sealand to co-found and host an offshore data haven called Haven Co. from 2000 to 2008, and again from last year in varying forms. At first claiming total freedom from international copyright laws by hosting content locally, but quickly backtracking on this claim. In reality, Haven Co. is now a virtual network of servers, hosting encrypted content with no one location, with the encryption keys, while the encryption keys are stored at Sealand itself. Meaning the bare minimum attempt at a legal loophole, the relationship between the Pirate Bay and Sealand is an interesting one. Pictured here is the servers that were hosted at Sealand. As you can see, it's not a very impressive array. But it would appear, Operating in many ways like Haven Co., Cyberbunker claimed to provide completely secure hosting of almost all data. They hosted both WikiLeaks and the Pirate Bay in the past. Cyberbunker was briefly hosted in a former NATO nuclear bunker. Interesting, another repurposed physical fortification of the state. As it turned out, protections of such a bunker offered were fairly impractical, as the company was governed by the laws of the Netherlands and the European Union, and ultimately was sued several times. However, the bunker did serve as an effective marketing tool after Cyberbunker were evicted. And the website still makes heavy reference to the bunker in many fantastical ways, with heavy photoshopped images and floor plans seemingly ready to bait the press. The promotion of the bunker has become an in-joke of sorts, a private meme. Again, I'd encourage you to go to the Cyberbunker website. It's pretty entertaining. Again, Cyberbunker seems to contribute to reference their former physical location, often heavily in press, as a means of critiquing the policies of local government. The company presents the state as powerless and embarrasses them into debate about these topics. Their use of physical space serves as PR for both the company and their beliefs. The company's former head, now apparently proponent of the Pirate Bay in Berlin, while the physical location of their servers is unknown. Likely distributed and carefully masked or hidden within the network using techniques more effective than physical stone. This brings me back to Banos Pionen, a data center in central Stockholm. Again hosted in a former Cold War nuclear bunker, and again former hosts of both WikiLeaks and the Pirate Bay, and also the Swedish Pirate Party, the reappropriation of aesthetics of Cold War paranoia to embody the new concerns initially attracted me to this space, as did the referential feedback loop of the inspiration of sci-fi on the architect in charge of converting the space. Albert Franz Lanoord cites Alien, Silent Running, and the set designs of 1960s James Bond films. My own experience of visiting the space is a feeling of being admitted to a secret society, a vault, while also somehow a complete sense of connection and transparency, feeling at the center of the network. The bunker is again for show. Entry to the server halls has the same level of security of any co-location data center. The nuclear blast doors and submarine engine generator are now mostly for show also. Along with the paranoia and fetishization of the Cold War aesthetics, there's a knowing humor. This is a quote from John Carling, the CEO of Bahnhof. Again, quite playful in his description of his company. And here's the interior of the space. With this space and with these other spaces, I guess there's a notion of taking back data, treating it correctly with reverence, giving it the value it deserves, and providing provisions of alternatives that are sympathetic to certain ethoses. I'm going to end with some quotes. I mean, the architect, again, was interviewed quite recently after I visited the space, and he was asked, as a functional space close to the public, what were the aesthetics? Why were the aesthetics so important? I think it's because if you're a company selling what they're selling, the space and servers, it's very abstract. A lot of people don't even know what it is or don't really relate to this. They wanted, I think, something to have a really big impact on the visitors. And they knew if we did something spectacular, instead of just hiding it as usual, we would get a lot of coverage. So it was a way to visualize or embody the company. It was a way to do PR, and just by the design of the space, which is pretty cool, I think, and it makes the space accessible to clients as well, who otherwise would never go in, so it's also much easier to sell. The room you're not allowed to go inside is for technicians. He gestures towards a picture of one of the rooms housing the servers. But it's the most exciting room to be, so it'd be really boring if you weren't allowed to go in there. That's why we built this one, so it can actually bring the client and show them, look, that's where the information is going to be. Bahnhof exists in an interesting place in sort of the Swedish tech industry. They're actually kind of proponents for free speech and the freedom of the internet. So I think this the use of this data space is kind of a form of propaganda for their views. And I think it's like a very interesting sort of use of these sort of stunning images to, I guess, elevate what is quite an unsexy conversation around sort of taking back data and reclaiming data. I feel there's something dark and playful about Banos' theatrical hosting of data, and this is why it led me to use the location for my work, co-location time displacement. I'll play this work out, and then we'll discuss.
All right, thank you very much, Yuri Pattison, with this very interesting presentation.